Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Art Institute's beautiful Fullerton Hall. I'm very happy to be back in this room and welcoming you all in person today. I'd like to thank J.P. Morgan Chase for supporting this event. My name is Jill Bagaisky. I am the Executive Director for the Research Center here at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I am thrilled that you're joining us this afternoon to learn about two newly acquired Chinese ceramic moon flasks made centuries apart. As we begin, a brief reminder to please silence your mobile devices. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's program with Tao Wang. Tao is the Pritzker Chair of Arts of Asia, Executive Director of Initiatives in Asia, and Curator of Chinese Art at the Art Institute of Chicago. You might be familiar with Tao's curatorial handiwork if you visited the monumental 2018 exhibition, Mirroring China's Past, Emperors and Their Bronzes. Tao has also taken an innovative approach to bringing contemporary Chinese paintings into our historic galleries, with exhibitions such as Expressive Ink, paintings by Yang Yangping and Sheng Changqing in 2019, and Xu Longsen, Light of Heaven, 2018. Prior to joining the Art Institute, Tao served as Senior Vice President and Head of Chinese Works of Art at Sotheby's, New York, and he trained students as an instructor at the University of London. Tao is a consummate scholar who has published widely on topics related to Chinese art and archaeology. He is a recipient of the China National Book Award, and he has also received a prize from Antiquity, a peer-reviewed journal of world archaeology, for his outstanding scholarship. Tao holds a PhD in early Chinese culture from the University of London, and he joined us here in Chicago in 2015. Now, please join me in welcoming Tao Wang to the stage.
Thank you, Jill, for your kind introduction. It's been a long time since kind of coming back on site and talking, standing up here. So it's quite exciting, but a bit also I'm a bit anxious, just to see how it goes. But it's always a privilege and a pleasure to talk about the collection under our care. In particular, I'm going to talk about a very significant acquisition that was made in 2021. So that's fairly recent. Right, that's the piece, and now it's in our Asian Art Gallery, gallery number 134. This is a ceramic vase and called Moon Flask. It has actually a very poetic Chinese name, Bao Yue Ping. That's how the title of this lecture derived. Embracing the moon, Bao Yue, embracing the moon. So that's is already kind of add a bit kind of extra to its story. I mean, we, as a great museum, I think probably the most important thing is its collection and the stories associated with it. Because as curators, we come and go, but the collection stays. And they also make the story, people remember the story, and the new story is also being added to it. So that's it's also a great experience working as curator in this great museum. And this Ming flask is made in the 15th century during the period of Yongle. That is, say, the early Ming Dynasty. And as you can see, it sits beautifully in its case in our gallery. And it's also called blue and white. That is, of course, you can see it's painted with cardboard oxide pigments that is come out as blue against this very fine white glaze. The Art Institute has an excellent collection of Chinese art, especially ceramics, thanks to many distinguished Chicagoans, including the founding trustees, such as Martin Ryerson and Charles Hutchison, Samuel Nicholson, and many other generous patrons over the years. Just to name a few: Kate Buckingham, Russell Tyson, Henry Schrapp, and most recently, Dorothy Edinburgh. But doesn't matter how great the collection is, there's always something missing. When I came here in 2015, and we started a new assessment of the collection, and we have identified a few areas that need some strengthening. And one of them is the ceramics from the 15th century China, because we have a wonderful collection of Song ceramics, 11th, 12th century, and we also have a wonderful collection of later imperial period, the Qing Dynasty. That is from the 18th century up to 19th century. And there's two areas we are exceptionally strong. But for the Ming period, particularly early Ming period, we are comparatively weaker. We need have some transformative pieces to elevate the collection. And so maybe it's fate or it's luck. 2011, and we were approached by a collector who has this amazing piece. And after some negotiation, we finally made the acquisition in the following year, 2021. And we were very excited for the opportunity to add this iconic piece to the museum's already extensive, distinguished collection of Chinese ceramics. What's special about this piece? In fact, the direct origin of Ming flask was not in China. It's not indigenous, but it's come from the western side or from the Africa and Middle East. This particularly double-handed oval-shaped shape is flat, and it's probably derived from a pottery prototype that can be traced back to ancient Egypt. Like on the screen on your right hand, and this is probably some of you may already know this one. It's very famous lentoid bottle at the, I think it's at the Met, yeah, in New York. And it's come out from Egypt later period, around the 7th and 6th century BC. And it's very interesting because the name flask really come out from the function of this particular vase. Because this vase with inscription on the front, and actually talking about the sacrifice during the New Year. So it was perhaps contained with perfume, oil, or water from the nail and to the sacrifice altar. So that is how this name flask derived. And the second on your left, it's also interesting because this particular shape continued to be very popular in the Middle East. The metal flask, it's at the Freer Gallery in DC, Washington, DC. And it's also inlaid with these pictorial depictions of the life of the Christ. It is from Syria, dated to the 13th century, just a little bit earlier than the Ming Dynasty. And so that's, as you can see, this very almost direct relationship between this particular type to the Chinese moon flask. However, we do have some Chinese examples dated earlier than that, earlier than the 15th century, like two very interesting pieces in our collection. On your left is a bronze bottle, and also known as the Chinese name Bianhu, flat bottle. And as you can see, the shape, even it's got some kind of a foot, like this square foot, but the basic shape is very much related to the Middle Eastern or this prototype of moon flask, but just being added with a base. And it's also in our collection. It came in 1937, gifted by Kate Buckingham. So it's very got a great history and very rare, I would say, because it's incised with the decorations related to some nomadic people in the 1st century BC. So the influence could already kind of came out or came to Eastern Asia from the Middle East. And the other piece on your right hand, it's made of clay, and it came into the museum even earlier, 1924, also a gift from Kate Buckingham. And this piece, it's clearly related to Central Asia, because even the motifs showing some foreigners dancing and making grape wine, so it is related to mythology of winemaking in the Middle East. So that's just to see the cultural or the traces of cultural exchange started much earlier before the moon flask we are talking about. By the 15th century, when Chinese potter became interested in this particular shape, it retained only a basic relationship to the original form. The sophisticated, very circular outline of this flask and its bulging sides, which makes very soft, kind of around the edge, and they are difficult things to make with the pottery. It is challenged because we know by the time the most popular method for making pottery vessels was a wheel, potter's wheel. You can do a potter's wheel, but for moon flask of this particular shape, it has to be handmade, really hand built up. So it is a very much a job for very skillful craftsmen, and also, as we can see on this blue and white moon flask, involving some painter's activities. It's beautifully painted. This kind of moon flask, of course, some of them, they have unpainted pieces too. I mean, there's two pieces. One, the left one is from the Palace Museum in Taipei. Another, the right-hand one is from Palace Museum in Beijing. So clearly, those things were highly treasured and kept in the imperial collection. Because traditionally, the Yongle period has regarded as the golden age for Chinese ceramic production. They are admired for their intrinsic visual beauty and technological quality. The Ming flask we have, it is a work of absolutely singular quality, given its size, decoration, and rarity, and historical context. The fine workmanship and its harmony of form and the decoration reflect the fundamental strength of Chinese potter of this period. It has almost irresistible charm, and it's really pleasing to hold in hand, because if you haven't been to the gallery, I would encourage you to go to see it, because as you can see from this very round shape, I mean, I'm sorry to say you will not encourage you to hold it because it's very light, and the paste, if you look at the base, it's so fine, so smooth, like someone's skin, like a baby's skin. It's very, very smooth. So it's some people may say it's like a quiet connoisseur's taste, because it's not huge or imposing, but you have to get it close and to feel about its charm and its attraction. This particular piece, both sides are painted. They painted, of course, with flowers, as most Chinese porcelains do. They have some significance. The painting here, as we can see, they are carnations and also aster. These two plants, I mean, why these two plants? Because if we look at all the painted Chinese blue and white, it's very, very rare. I mean, you find the many camellia and leech, and you have even blossom, and all different kinds of flowers. But these two, carnation and aster, they are extremely rare. So that's already a puzzle. Why? And of course, we know all these flowers depicted on Chinese porcelains, particularly during the Yongle period, they often bear some significance or symbolism. As we now, if you check dictionary and look at all this medical Chinese medicine texts, and you do find some stories related to these plants. They somehow related to, they can be used, of course, as remedies, but when they come into as a decorative motif, they often associate with sometimes marriage, sometimes love. For example, the carnation, of course, they often been used during the wedding. So that's, of course, tell a story about it. Aster, it's very rare, I already said, because it's used also as a dye for dyeing cloth. But it also has a very interesting name in Chinese, known as Wu Wang Wo. Don't forget me. So it's that's almost like a phrase used often between lovers, kind of say, "Don't forget me," or sometimes in Japan they say, "I wouldn't forget you." That's kind of reversed. We now kind of think about kind of these two, of course, move out from the symbolism of this decoration, we also want to look at closely of what stories can we get from the object itself. And the one clue is the mark found on the base. It's very interesting, they have this jeweled mark. And that is, it doesn't happen. I mean, if you are a collector of Chinese ceramics, you often look at the base and say, oh, this is mark of the ring, like a Qianlong Emperor, Yongle Emperor, so you know when it was made. But this one, it's not like that. And it's very, very strange. It's drilled mark. And we now, maybe we say, oh, it must be an owner's mark. But who is the owner? Interestingly, we find a similar kind of the mark on porcelains, particularly Chinese porcelains, found in Middle East, in Syria, in India, in Turkey. Very, very interesting. So with this question, we did a bit of research, and then we had help from Regina Kroll, one of the leading experts of Chinese ceramics. She studied Chinese ceramics comprehensively, but she also studied similar pieces like our Ming flask. So she offered the following comments. These drilled marks were most likely put on Iran. Many pieces with such marks came to Turkey, probably through conquest, but they were also dispersed elsewhere in the Middle East. Of course, she said there's no firm evidence where the piece may have been. Turkey is possibility. So she made this observation. And we also learn more kind of interesting stories about its provenance. This object was first brought into Sotheby's, London, in a damaged condition, like this. It was in the 1990s. And so Sotheby kept it for a number of years and eventually offered it at its auction in 2005. So it was acquired by the collector. But interesting stories from the vendor. The vendor who brought this piece to Sotheby's, who told Sotheby's that he obtained this moon flask as part of a furniture decoration from a hotel he bought in the 1950s in London. So that's very interesting because I don't know whether we were trying to locate this gentleman. I believe he may be still alive, but very, very old. So through Sotheby's, we tried to contact him, but he already kind of not in, basically come back, couldn't have direct communication with him. So all the information we have came from the information he offered to the Sotheby's experts in the 1990s and 2000. So that's very interesting how this piece may be made in China and then exported to Middle East and then came back to Europe. So that's just a lot of stories. I mean, we as a curator, as a museum, we always study the provenance of objects. So we keep searching for new information. So maybe one day we can find more stories to piece together the fuller picture. So when the piece was found, sorry about the black and white photograph, because it's what they found in Sotheby's archive. But when we got it, we actually did a very thorough study of the object. And as you can notice from this X-ray, and the top of the vase is missing. And like sorry, can you see here? Yeah, so it's reinstalled, or I would say replaced. And also, there is an extensive crack across the body, one side of the body. Another side of the body, the front is perfect, but on the back, got this long crack. But most interestingly, the crack, you can see the holes along the crack. That is stitching holes. Very, very interesting, because that is a method we often find on old Chinese, or even just find on porcelain or ceramic pieces, like this. They have a metal pin stapled, almost like stapled into the ceramics. But of course, it's not stapled, it's just through very skillful craftsmen, they drill little holes, so they stitch the crack together just to prevent it further damage. It's not say already broken, it's cracked, but they want to solidate the piece. And this piece, you may say, where it's come from? Actually, it's in the National Museum of Japan in Tokyo. You may think, oh, what's the special about this cracked Chinese bowl dated to 11th century? But actually, it's probably the most famous Chinese ceramic piece in Japan. You find it's classified as national treasure because it's actually exported to Japan when it was made in the 11th century, 12th century. And then when it's cracked, the craftsman or restorer stitched together. So it's the history, and also it's part of the story of the object. And of course, the piece we have, you can see in the gallery now, it's been very sensitively restored and to bring back its original aesthetic appeal. So you don't see it, but as a curator or as a conservator, I think we like to keep that story. And so if you look at the back very closely, we still have a little bit trace, not too obvious, but we can still see that very fainted mark on the body. So that's moon flask. Extremely rare, I said. It's actually, there are two pieces in the world. One is here, you can see. Another one is in Turkey at the Topkapi Palace, or Topkapi Sarayı Palace Museum in Istanbul. And they have probably one of the best collections of Chinese ceramics from the 13th century up to 15th or 16th century. Really incredible collection. But that piece, that moon flask, is probably the most important piece in that collection. As you can see on this cover of this catalog, this exhibition organized by the Museum for Japanese Exhibition, and this is a cover of that piece. And you can also notice that the top is also have a metal cover. So the top is already also a bit missing, and then so they put that metal lid on top. But it's very strange that we know, it's a shame I've never been to the place, but I was told this piece is not on view because we're trying to find any image or any information, contact the museum. We hear nothing from them. Very, very bizarre. So, and I started to think, what happened to that piece? Because we know there was an earthquake a few years ago. I said, oh gosh, I hope it's not damaged. But still, and one day I think I will probably make a trip to Istanbul and to find out what happened to that piece. I mean, the museum itself, Topkapi Sarayı, it's incredible site. I think anyone goes to Istanbul would visit that site because it's old Imperial Palace. and full of beautiful tires and also Chinese ceramics. They do have made a display of Chinese porcelain. I mean, there's like you say, they are also 15th century. Like this one is a white kind of ear, and it's also made during the Yongle period. Very, very beautiful. But you can find quite a number of these things around. For the moon flask, if you compare them, the size, the decoration, you just see like maybe a little bit kind of a hand like variation, but you can clearly say they were made as a pair. So there are two existing examples in the world. And so that's amazing how they kind of survived. And maybe one day we can try to reunite them, put them together for exhibition or something like that. And it's also to be said, the Chinese like Yongle porcelains were probably the most sought after in the Middle East. But there's another reason, because many of them actually they were copies after the metal works, Islamic metal works. They're taking sometimes almost exact kind of a copy, but of course, because you never find this shape, like on the right hand, it's again Yongle blue and white porcelain in Palace Museum, Taipei, and its prototype, it's based in the British Museum. It's also 13th century, maybe just 150 years earlier, and so clearly the Chinese potter copied this particular shape. And that's one, too. The metal ear is also in the British Museum, and it's actually dated. It's very interesting. It's dated, it's 12... do I have the date? Actually, I probably do have the date, if I can find it. Sorry, maybe I missed it, or... Yes, I do find the date. It's actually dated 1232, so it's early 13th century. And the Chinese copy is 15th century. So it's just less than 200 years gap. And because this, and you find there's very much a cultural exchange between East Asia and the Middle East during the 15th century, and it was much more the activities. I mean, I think right now many historians or archaeologists have been trying to reconstruct that kind of trade route, but we know from from porcelain, we know that during the 15th century, when the Chinese court, the Ming empress, they controlled the Jingdezhen, built its imperial kiln. So they were very much making a lot of international pieces. And they, maybe it's just to say that another story related to Yongle Emperor is we know the Admiral Zheng He, who sailed along the Pacific, went to all the islands, and then one of thing he did was also carrying a lot of this porcelain silk as gifts for those kingdoms. So that's how kind of you find this Yongle as probably thought as like the China kind of at that time. They were the most sophisticated, the most beautiful things you can obtain. So that's how I think all moon flasks fit in with that big background or historical context. And I mean, just to also to say that it was the piece in the top copy museum actually give us a further thought on this kind of ownership of some what we call the cultural objects, because sometimes we say it's Chinese and it's Persian, but then when we look at many of things in our collection, we find the question maybe should be asked differently, and we need to find out what's the made for, and also the function in different cultural contexts. Okay, just to make it a bit short. And add a bit of archaeological background to that. Just very recently, I think maybe 2 years ago, in Jingdezhen, they constructed a new museum called Imperial Museum. Again, sorry, it's because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to visit the site, so I just got some images from people sent to me. As you can see, it's the new Imperial Museum, Imperial Museum. And again, they've been excavating the kilns. What happened is when the Imperial kiln was under the patronage of the court, they made things only for imperial court, and the imperial court was sending them out. They were not allowed to sell them at the market. And if there are pieces by any imperfection, it will be broken and buried. So that's why actually at the Imperial Museum, the archaeologists there have been digging up the site, and they find, again, some moon flasks also made there, but obviously they were not perfect, so they were smashed and buried, and they've been pieced together. And so the story is that this moon flask also become an iconic piece, like I said. The extent is really can be reflected on some of the imperial collections built in the 18th century. And if you remember, Gio mentioned the exhibition Mirroring China's Past. We actually borrowed one very important painting from the from Palace Museum in Beijing, from an old imperial collection. And as you can see, it's a portrait of Emperor Qianlong, and he sitting among his most favored antiquities. He was probably the biggest collector in Chinese history. And as you can see, there's a Yongle blue and white moon flask on the table. That table is French. It's actually a French table. Very, very interesting painting. And these two pieces are found in the Palace Museum in Taipei. One is actually very interesting. This one is a painting of camellia. Yeah, I said it's a plant you find in China or with a strong symbolism. But this one is really interesting. Scholars have been researching on this particular piece. And so far they found it's actually a person's story of searching for water source. So it's actually related to some Persian story. It's not a Chinese story. But this one remained. There's another one, I think in Top Copy Museum, I believe. But there are maybe like 2 or 3 of the same motif. And this one is in the Palace Museum in Taipei. Qianlong, and he was such passionate about Yongle moon flask, so he tried to make copies. It's also in our gallery 134, and as you can see, there's a very large moon flask on display. That is made for the Qianlong Emperor, because on the base there's actually a mark, say, 大清乾隆年制, so it's made during the reign of Qianlong. It's very big and it's very well made. I think technologically it's really superior, because to make large flat vase like that, it's extremely difficult. And the painting is very meticulous. I mean, it's imposing, but somehow if you put together with the Yongle one, you feel it just lacks a little bit of the subtlety and elegance. So, I mean, Qianlong's father also copied a moon flask, but I'm not going to show here. I mean, there are quite a number of them in the museum collections, and but compared to our Yongle one, it is not the same league. So now, the second puzzle, what are they? These two actually moon flasks are in our collection, but it's not in the Asian art department. It's actually in the applied art of Europe. So they were known as the Mittens. Mittens is a ceramic factory in England, in Staffordshire. And they started, one of the earliest one already in the 18th century, kind of Victorian time, and then in the 19th century, particularly around the 1870s, it started to work with a very famous Scottish designer, Christopher Dresser. So those moon flasks were made or probably designed by Dresser. Because Dresser was famous for his style called Anglo-Orientals, because he was copying Persian, Japanese, and Chinese design for his ceramic designs. And there's two pieces, also very interestingly, came into a museum, to the Art Institute, about the same time, 2020, and that time was a decorative, European decorative art, received these gifts from a couple, Helena Fortunoff and Robert Grossman. So they, I mean, there are more, but there's two. I thought if you don't know they were Mittens, you would think they are Chinese, would you? Yeah. But again, you can see after a couple of years, 100 years, and the story kind of back to Europe, the same story. So that's how kind of art really changes the world, kind of really make things happening around the world. And now I want to use the rest of time to talk about a new acquisition. This is a moon flasks actually made in 2010 by, actually it's a work collaboratively between the painter, artist, a woman artist, Fu Yiyao, and a porter, Huang Yunpeng. And this piece, as you can see, it's painted with a blue and also with copper. And, but it's interesting with the landscape, and on the back, like two boys playing. So it's very, very modern, and it's almost like a landscape painting together with the fictive paintings. But they somehow, on this very charming vase. And Fu Yiyao is the fifth child of probably the most famous Chinese artist of the 20th century, Fu Baoshi. And Fu Baoshi, he studied in Japan, and then he came back to China, and he wrote books on Chinese theory of Chinese paintings, and he also taught in different places. But he's very famous for creating a new style, combining Chinese traditional ink painting with 20th century, some of Japanese influence too. So he really, I mean, he's probably the most sought after artist on the market today, and we don't have anything by him, very sadly. But Fu Yiyao, she was born in Nanjing, and then he graduated actually from Nanjing Normal University in the 70s. She studied literature, but in the 70s, when China was just opened after Cultural Revolution, and she wanted to study art at the same school her father studied painting. So somehow he was managed to be, I can tell you all the stories she told me, but it was so rare in the 70s for Chinese to leave China to study abroad. So I think one of the vice premiers helped her because the vice premier was a friend of her father, so helped her to go to Japan. And so she started in Japan since 1970s, and she established artists, very famous in Japan now. She painted all the temple manuals and doing all sorts of exhibitions. So she's basically still Chinese origin, but she's very much integrated into Japanese society today. But she still goes back to China to particularly work at Jingdezhen with local porters. That's a picture of Yiyao and her father. Yeah. And her collaborator is a master craftsman, Huang Yinpeng, and he's also very famous in Jingdezhen, like local hero. And he makes the most beautiful copies of imperial ceramics. So like if anything sold for over $1 million on the market, and the next month and he'll produce one, of course, he's not going to sell a fake. So he put his name, say, okay, look, my craftsmanship can compete with the best porcelains ever made. So he's very famous in China and taught a lot of students. So in 2010, they two collaborated, and for quite a long period, they made a number of pieces, but this is probably the most beautiful one, Moon Flask. And we were lucky to get it as a gift from a friend of the artist, Dr. Ye Guoxin, in Taipei. So that's just, again, a very generous offer to the museum. And now, I'd probably just like to really conclude. I mean, this is Jingdezhen you visit today, and they're still making some high-quality porcelains, and some are just households, utensils. So it's probably most active, one of the most active centers for ceramic productions in China today. And many artists established studios, workshops there. And just very recently, I've been kind of looking at one Chinese ceramic artist who actually was born in Jingdezhen, and now he's in Beijing at Tsinghua University, one of the leading ceramic artists in China today, Mr. Bai Ming. I know he has done a lot of exhibitions in China and in Europe, but maybe one day we can also introduce his works into our collection. And I think I've run out of my time, and thank you very much for coming, and I still have some time to take questions. Thank you. Sorry, I can't see you because the light on my eye. But if someone, if you put your hands up, I think someone is going to hand you a microphone. Sorry, could you speak up? For the Moon Flask. Yeah, it's nothing. It's just really just protective reason. When China made it, particularly for Imperial Collection, but when they were exported to Middle East, I think they were actually used as a flask for oil or water, and because that's why you often find the top is broken with a metal lid. Yeah. Okay.
There's a question in the front, if you could just repeat it after she asks it.
Is the clay porcelain? Is the clay porcelain? Take it higher.
Oh yeah, it's porcelain, and let's maybe just explain. I'm sure here we have porters and or ceramic artists here. And when we say porcelain, it's actually made from Jinjiazhen. They use a special Tao Wang clay from Jinjiazhen. So they have this very hi-fi, very soft, strong body. But if clay is just the material. And if it's slow-fired, it can be just pottery. But we now use ceramics because it covers both pottery and porcelain. No more questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, one more question from that. Oh, yeah, it was. No. Sorry, I explained in my lecture, it was discovered in 1990s and sold at Sotheby's in London 25 and was bought by a collector. We acquired it from the collector in 2021. So that's, yeah, we didn't buy at auction, yeah. Okay. If no more questions, and yeah, I'd like to thank everyone again for coming and for spending time. Thank you very much. Yeah. And maybe you saw the one in the back.